Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another edition of Deportes Nation. I'm Alex Parra. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Today, soccer podcast number 4, numero 4, still with not an official name, but we are working on that. Beside me, you can see him. We welcome in Mr. Victor Araiza. First of all, Victor, good day. How are you? And welcome to our 4th podcast. We're still here.
We're still here, Alex, talking soccer. Getting to the interesting part of things in the domestic leagues, right? MLS and WSL, getting to the playoff race there. So certainly always a pleasure to talk soccer here with you.
And Victor, have you given a thought to our name? What do you think we should call ourselves? Just throw something out there. We had someone on social media call it Paraiza or something like that. That was a good one, wasn't it?
I don't know. Maybe we find
Soccer
something a little more.
I like that one.
Bring Houston more into the mix since we talk about it a lot, but we'll get there.
Victor and Alex, the soccer podcast.
Yeah.
Well, as long as you, ladies and gentlemen, are still enjoying it, we are certainly enjoying. Victor, before we get into the different topics we'll be discussing, how was your soccer week? It was busy, and like you said, right, things are starting to heat up relative to the push for the playoffs in the MLS, in the NWSL, and certainly when it comes to U.S. soccer, some news this week we'll talk about, but a lot of ending of summer, beginning of fall type things, and we all have to be kind of watching all of the, at least domestic local leagues, right?
Yeah, and then big games around the world as well too. Obviously, the Milan derby there with the American connection with Pulisic, getting his first biggest test of the season, and it didn't go as easy, as smooth as the start of the year. The Mexican Clásico, which was just a beatdown, right? America Chivas, but that's maybe for the next episode, because I don't think they're out right away, but that's probably the most watched game in the U.S. this weekend. So that's one to keep an eye on for those reasons alone. But yeah, here, like you said, locally, a lot of good stuff, and continue to follow our teams and see if they can make the playoffs.
Well, speaking of playoffs, why don't we start with the NWSL Houston Dash that finally picked up a victory over Racing Louisville, or is it Racing? Someone will have to tell us.
That's the question I'm trying to figure out. But
the best pronunciation for it, but it was a 1-0 victory. They hadn't won since the beginning of June 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. Victor, it was time for this team that's gone through a change of manager, of head coach, and finally putting some points together. But there's still a long way to go relative to securing a place in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think mathematically they look like they're only 3 points away now, right? But with the 3 games left they have, all 3 of them, obviously, other opponents that are going, trying to have their own hopes in making the playoffs. The first one that looks farther ahead, coincidentally, their old head coach, Juan Carlos Amoros, over with Gotham. But we know with the coaching change, with Sarah Loudon again at the interim, this is her second stint, and now you see a good reaction there. A team that was struggling to score in the Dash, finally getting a goal. The 2 Mexican players, right? That was a big storyline of the season, how they were going to link up. And by the way, they're heading over to the Women's Gold Cup qualifications now with Mexico. So obviously for the national team, that also bodes well. But on the eve of Mexican Independence Day, or the Grito as we know it in Spanish, right? They combine Sanchez to Ordóñez, and that was the difference. And tightly contested game, I think, because Louisville had some chances, but I think overall a good reaction from the Dash. We'll see if it saves the season, right? Like you said, still a long way to go. Still pretty difficult to get in the fully, I think, but it's a step in the right direction, I think.
And Victor, where do you think we are with this franchise? Again, last season, we've talked about this, making the playoffs for the first time, now changing coaches toward the end of the season. The timing prior to this, of course, and now you can say it was the right move to pick up at least 3 points. Playoffs still a reality. Is it a franchise that now is consistently going to find ways to win? And by the way, I was looking at the results, Victor. They haven't been blown out really all season. They haven't been able to score some goals. That's been the big difference. And you mentioned Sanchez Ordóñez, the duo coming together finally in Louisville or against Louisville. But the reality is this a team that also will stay together with the moves that are happening already? Are they going to work as a franchise, you think, to keep this mix together, keep this group together for the future?
Well, that's one of the questions, right? Because if a new coach comes in, or whoever the coach is, I mean, even if Sarah Loudon stays, right, which I know for a lot of the fans, that's probably the number one choice.
Yeah.
It's still to be seen if she wants the job, if she's going to be considered, or if they're going to choose to bring somebody more experienced. But I think whoever you bring in, it depends on what that system is. It depends on the players they want to bring in, or if they're satisfied with the current group. Yeah, that's a good question. That's one for the future. I think there's some pieces to build off here, right? To kind of go off what you're asking. Obviously, Sanchez Ordóñez. I mean, you already have him. Ordóñez, I think, is a unique player that she has some height where maybe you don't get that a lot in the forward position in the women's game, or not the way that she can do it right at such a young age. Sanchez obviously has some success already in her career, won championships with Mexico. So Jane Campbell had some good saves, obviously. I think defensively you have some pieces there. But, yeah, that's the big question is what direction are they going to take? I mean, ultimately, you mentioned the big issue this season was they weren't getting the goals. We'll see if they can get it here at the end of the season. Maybe that puts up a case for Loudon to stay on. We'll see. There is a lot of questions, but ultimately, I mean, yeah, the biggest thing is they have to be consistent. One good game like this, I mean, it feels good, I'm sure, for the fans, but it's not going to cut it. They got to get it consistently. They got to get to the playoffs. They got to be a more solid team.
And speaking of those fans, Victor, you and I have tracked, if you will, the attendance at Shell Energy, and it continues to remain about the same. I don't know if there's been a spike or a drop in the numbers this season, but it seems there's a steady, consistent group of fans that's supportive of the Dash. What's going to move the needle? And what I mean by that is move the needle, obviously, to try to get more people, more fans to support this team. It just I was expecting from last season's playoff game to have more than the 4,000 to 5,000 that are consistently there in the lower bowl. It just hasn't happened this year, and I don't pretend to have the answer for it. What are your thoughts on that piece? I think that's an important piece. How can they start filling up that stadium?
We've gone a little bit back and forth, right? The past couple of weeks, I think the Dynamo have that same problem where maybe they get a bit more fans at their games, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same group of fans.
Yeah.
They are moving the needle, with the rest of the crowd in Houston, the general sports crowd, the general soccer crowd. I go back to the community connection. I think that's kind of where it starts. And then, because everybody we talk to, right, with the clubs, or at least everybody, every time I bring up that question, the first thing they say is, well, we have to win games, right? We win and people will come back. And I think we've seen it over the years. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
You can win and, people are still maybe not going to show up. I think you need both, right? You have to have a successful team. You have to maybe show more transparency or show more, a personality in transmitting that message to the community that says you have that competitive team. But then you also got to go out and shake hands and be part of the community. I think to really resonate. A lot of the same crowd I think I see at games. A lot, even though maybe the numbers can be moved a bit, right? I think we also see a lot of groups. How much of those are free tickets? How much of those are paid tickets? Those are kind of answers that we don't have because those are obviously kept by the club. But I think, again, all this stuff being considered, I think that's what it comes down to. You have to make a connection with the community.
For the Dash here to wrap up the regular season, they take on Gotham, as you mentioned, Angel City, and they close out on the 15th of October against Orlando Pride. I was looking at the schedule, so really not a lot more opportunity really to pick up points and to finish strong. And who knows? Let's be optimistic. Maybe this change of manager, of coach, will spark what energy hadn't maybe shown up on the field. And there's still 3 matches here to figure it out. Maybe that's the approach. That's the best approach that one can hope for at this point, Victor.
Absolutely. And obviously in between, they have the international break on the women's side now. So they get a little bit of rest. But as you mentioned, Ordóñez and Sanchez are 2 that are going to be going over to Mexico. Thankfully, it's not that big a trip, right? As opposed to they have to go a little bit farther or something for the qualification. But coming back, I think Gotham's probably the biggest test. And then if they can get something out of there, maybe at least a point, they can start thinking about, and depending on what the other teams do too, obviously, they can maybe think about something against, I think Orlando and what are the other teams? I think Angel City is the other one. So, I mean, there you go. That's direct opponents. If it goes kind of like Louisville, which I thought maybe Louisville would put up more of a fight because they're, in the same boat in the playoff race. But anything can happen, right, in these games. Let's see if they go out and do it. I think they certainly have players to win, and maybe the coach was exactly what they needed to do.
Well, that said, Victor, why don't we talk a little bit about the other professional team in town, and I'm referring to the Houston Dynamo and what they just did facing St. Louis.
Yeah, that's a good, I think, result. I put more stock into this one more so than the other wins, right? I mean, the other wins are important because of the 3 points and obviously a couple extra goals they picked up. But I think this one to me is more impressive than the other ones because obviously I think St. Louis, well, first, I mean, they're first in the Western Conference, but anybody that's followed them sees what they've done this year in such a little time, the type of players that they have. I think it was maybe a little bit of a couple things, right? Obviously, maybe an off night for St. Louis, or maybe just on the road and not the same strength. It took them a while to sort of get into the game. Eventually, they did, right? They weren't denied. They got that goal, and they just didn't have enough time to maybe get a second. Whereas Houston did well to get the first, but has been the story for most of the year. They sort of just kind of hang in there with that 1 goal lead. If they get a second or third, I mean, that'd be great, but they're not going to risk a lot to go get it, right? I certainly don't think that way. I put it as an important result, but now you see, right, where they were, third? With this result, it drops them to 5th, depending on how the next couple of games can go. That can really either keep them in the playoff race, push them out, or maybe even lift them up into having a home game in the playoffs. So it's going to be a roller coaster here in the next couple of weeks.
Look, there's a couple of ways to look at the match this past Saturday, and you were there at the Shell Energy Stadium. The crowd, not a full stadium, still a team that's, I think, trying to be more consistent. And we'll hear in a few minutes some of Ben Olsen's comments regarding his team's performance. But the mindset has changed, at least from his perspective, Victor. And what I'm referring to is, look, it's no longer about just trying to make the playoffs. We feel we have a team. He feels he has a team that belongs there, and they're pushing for a little bit more. So let's give that context. Playing a team like St. Louis, by the way, it was Tim Parker coming back. I'm sure he wanted a little bit more out of that match, former Houston Dynamo player. But this is a solid measure against one of the top teams in the league. So it's not disappointing necessarily if you look at it relative to the past. But I know Ben Olsen felt he could have picked up 3 points this past Saturday against the team from St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that you can sort of point to. They've been better at home. I still think there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here with the regular season. It's still very suave, right? It's still soft. I feel it's not the same intensity as the playoffs, and I think one, for obvious reasons, but I just don't think it's. I just think it comes down to that, right? I think it's not the same stakes. People, whether people like to hear it or not, I don't think teams, whether they're playing at home or they're playing away, take Houston maybe as seriously as they take other opponents, right? I think there is a bit of an underestimation because of the past of Houston. I'm not saying this team is the same one, but I do think there is some of that carries over where maybe teams maybe feel a little more confident, or maybe just because of the way the regular season is and what they prioritize. I don't think the Dynamo always get other teams' best shots, right? That all said, it doesn't matter. For Houston, it's just about picking up three points at home. It has to feel rough that you didn't get them, right? This would have been a big feel-good win, but not just because it was over St. Louis, but because you would have solidified a little bit better of your place there in the playoffs. They got Vancouver coming in, who, depending on how that game can go, we have to remember they're not going to have Carrasquilla because of yellow card accumulation. Yep. I believe Franco Escobar is going to be another player that's not going to be available, so that changes things on Wednesday night. And then they go over to Kansas City just a couple of days later, and that's not going to be an easy game. OpenCup Final, and then we talk about Texas Derby. So I think for all these games that are just kind of coming at them, I think that was the big miss in this St. Louis game. But I think I told you, I said this in the prior show. Regardless of how many points they drop here in this St. Louis game, independence, a few more Mexicans out, right? Saw some flags there. Ultimately, I think when fans go to watch their home team, they're there to root their home team on. So you got some of that, right? Ref calls don't go your way. You got people shouting. I think it was fine. I think they certainly have the support. Certainly having the team up 1-0 helps things, right? Throughout the course of the night, you want to see them see out the result. And then ultimately you didn't come away with it completely. So, just fans maybe would have liked the whole 3 points. But I mean, I think, again, for the people that have season tickets that go to a lot of these games, it's a different feeling this year going there, getting a lot more wins at home than previous years where it's been a rough night. And
that's definitely a positive. Well, why don't we take a listen to the comments post-match from head coach Ben Olsen.
I'd feel better about it if we had more 3 points in there. We'd have, a few ties. So, but it is nice to continue to add points in a playoff push. It's not all 3. It would have been a big 3 points for us tonight, but we didn't get it. Again, I said it before. It's the best team in the West, and grabbing a point against them, should be kind of okay, but it's not in there, and those are the expectations that are changing, I think, in this locker room, and hopefully the culture here is that it's not okay to tie the best team in the West. And I'm looking at it. We played well enough to win.
David. All right, adding on a little bit into that, the 6 unbeaten streak in all competitions. How does the team keep that going?
Well, I think the mentality is the right one because we're disappointed. We're disappointed that we didn't get all 3, and we understand the importance of Wednesday now and how vital those points are. So, again, I don't. They're hungry. They have 2 clear objectives, and that's one to get in the postseason and keep plugging away and grabbing points, and then the other is obviously the Open Cup. But that's kind of on the back burner, and we'll focus on that when we get through the next few games.
So you can hear him a little bit disappointed, Victor, from number one, not being able to pick up the 3 points. And one of the things that Coach Ben Olsen said was, listen, the culture is changing. Our expectation is changing. We're disappointed that we didn't pick up the 3 points. And then he alluded and mentioned what you were talking about, what's coming up next, that now it's a big game really Wednesday against Vancouver, the importance of that game, not getting ahead of himself, but also mentioning and talking about the US Cup. So a lot of games here in a short amount of time. This, to me, can define the season. I think September will tell you in many ways whether you picked up another US Cup championship and defeated Messi, and we'll talk about Miami here in a little while, and whether or not the team is coming together. So you could tell from his eyes, from his mannerisms, that Coach Ben Olsen really believes, as he should, that his team should have done a lot more against St. Louis. 3 points for him was the minimum. But that's a change. That's a change in culture and expectation, Victor, that this team just didn't have in the past.
Yeah. I still think it's to be seen, right? I don't know if you get a change in culture in 1 year. I think having an Héctor Herrera at his level helps a lot in that department, helps a lot in the results this year, helps a lot in the mentality of the team on the field to have a leader of his qualities to push the team on, a guy that doesn't want to exit as a substitute, right? A guy that just, coaches players, whether it's through the week in practice, whether it's on the field, it literally is like having a coach on the field. You see him pull the strings, and I think that's been a big key. And you should piggyback on some of that stuff, right? And try to be a little bit more uplifting. In that sense, maybe I'm a little shocked that he wasn't a little bit more uplifting in the press conference and like you said, showing more frustration rather than, maybe focusing more on the positive things that Houston did too. Because I think there's no shame of taking that tie with St. Louis, what that team is this year, the way they're built. I still think Houston has a lot of ways to go in certain places. I think there's, again, guys like Herrera, obviously the quality of a Carrasquilla, Sviatchenko has been a big piece, I think. Clark has been great in moments. Escobar, I think, was a great pickup as well, right? So I think there's maybe some pillars here or some pieces that have picked you up from that change in culture. But the only way you're going to complete that change in culture, as we've said, is if you make the playoffs. If this team, in these next couple of games don't get it done, that the culture hasn't changed.
Alex Parra, Victor Araiza here on our Deportes Nation Soccer Podcast. Thanks to all of you that are joining us. We appreciate it. Talking about the local teams, at least on the professional level, the Dash, and now the Dynamo FC, a team that appears is finally poised to return to the playoffs. Now, Victor, let's talk about something that maybe we don't talk about enough, but it's part of our Houston sports panorama. I'm going to use that word. It's September, October. Things have shifted already, Victor. College football is back. NFL is back. The Texans may not be winning, but they are definitely close to filling out NRG Stadium. That takes away attention from the Dynamo and their push for the playoffs. You have the Astros continuing to do well, headed to postseason in Major League Baseball. The Rockets are right around the corner and making noise. How, and this is a question that I think we have to ask ourselves, do the Dynamo and Dash find a way to get attention in late September, early October, when the Houston sports scene is full? And not only the local teams, like I said, the Rice and the U of H's, U of H playing in the Big 12 when it comes to football. The calendar is full. Even getting coverage is difficult. How would you, Victor, and I'm going to ask a pointed question, how would you deal with that? You talk about getting closer to the community. That's part of this. But how do you get people, number one, informed that you are or aren't in the playoffs? And second, that people should come out to games when there may either be direct conflicts, or there's certainly going to be where fans and families have to make a choice about, man, am I going to Texans game? Am I going do I try to get some tickets made? I think it's a reality that the Dash and the Dynamo have to deal with.
Yeah, well, I think a couple things, right? To maybe rebuttal a little bit. A city, a metropolitan area of about 7 million people, I think there's enough to go around. So I don't, I know because a lot of times, fans of our soccer teams obviously kind of bring those up too, right? I mean, we're almost conditioned to have some of these excuses. And I know the reasons, and I agree with you, they exist. But I also think there's more than enough people here. We know just the soccer public alone, right? What they are. There's also the general Houston sports public, which I think, they're going to probably support all the teams. So you can get a couple of that. There's just, the general public who's just looking for something to do. And again, I think anybody that can kind of, peruse on social media and see just, between our connections, all the concerts, all the events, like you mentioned. I mean, when people have money to go out, right? People, are looking for things to do. I think you just got to give them a reason to. You gotta bring them out. You gotta be relevant. I think that's one of the biggest things we mentioned about the Houston soccer teams. They gotta be in people's minds. They gotta remind people they exist.
I'm going to interrupt you, Victor, and that's exactly my point. Can they just sit back and you think people will find them, or there has to be a proactive approach and plan?
Not. And I think, again, if you're just looking at whether you call them competition or the fellow teams in town, they're not sitting on what, for example, the Astros aren't sitting on the World Series championships and just hoping people come out. You see them doing advertising. You see them doing promotion. The Rockets, the Texans. I think that's a big reason why I always kind of point to the Dynamo, and why isn't Ted Siegel allocating more resources to the marketing side of things, the advertising side of things. Hector Herrera, right? We saw billboards when he arrived. We just had Mexican Independence Day. He just returned to the Mexican national team. We want to piggyback off that, right? No mention of him or this game, I think, anywhere. And if we're in Hispanic Heritage Month, then, I mean, you don't have a better candidate now than him, than Coco Carrasquilla with Panama and what he did in the Gold Cup to really build up these stars. That's why when I go to the investment, it's not just seats. It's not just, the office space. There needs to be a push here to make this team relevant, to get them in the community. We know all the leagues are in town, right? I don't know. I'm not going to get into what makes all this happen. I'm sure it sounds easy, but again, if they want to make it happen, Hector, we're going to need you. Rest of the players, let's get out. Let's go out to these leagues. Let's get on it, right? Again, you can't wait for people to come to you.
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's the actual spend on a media buy and getting we're in the playoffs. Come see us this Sunday, October 20th, whatever October 20th may or may not be, at the Shell Energy, and be all over the place. So make that hard push. But you're right, it's got to be also coming, and I think specifically in the community, getting players out, getting the message out that we're here, that we're relevant, that we're making a playoff push, and really sell that, Victor. I think it's a combination of things, but that machine has to keep going, and it isn't a one-time thing. I think in the past there were billboards announcing certain things, and maybe you partner with other sponsor partners to make things happen.
Right.
So I think it's knowledge. I go back to my initial question and my point. I think it does get crowded, Victor, and I think people, this is my perspective, have to make a choice, and often they'll go, okay, Dynamo, I didn't know their season was still going on. I've had people ask me, hey, when is the season? People to this day don't know when the season starts and ends. And yes, is it easy to Google and get on the smartphone?
But you're making it hard for them. And if that's the case, if you're waiting for people to Google you, you're making it hard for them to find you. No, you need to make it easy for them to, when is the game, right? Make the buzz. Like, hey, this Sunday, or the next one coming up now, it's Vancouver, right? Wednesday night. Figure it out. I don't know if you do...
bobbleheads. We need the Alex Parra bobblehead.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't know if you do, people want to come out to the Woodlands. We got a bus. We'll get you to the stadium and back. I mean, I don't know. But I think if you want to find efforts, you can find them to get people to the stadium.
So, Victor, let me ask you that. I happened just a few days ago, within the week, broadcast a match of the USL Championship League, the LA Lights. They have a llama, literally a llama as a pet, as a mascot. They have promotions at halftime. Yes, it's very grassroots. I'm going to use those words, okay? You can like or dislike it. Do the Dynamo need to realize, do the Dash need to realize that, yes, in a city of 7 million plus, a metropolitan area, for the Dash to have 4,000 to 5,000 people, that's not a good number? and it's not just necessarily about the spend on a marketing side, Victor, but it's about getting involved with the community. I don't know what promotions the Dash have been a part of or not this season, but do they need to go to, I'm going to say this, simple things that are, hey, $2 tickets, $1 beer? Is the marketplace asking for that, Victor? Or are the Dash
I think
comparable,
they have in the past.
comparable
I think we've seen
to major league sports in the city? I don't know how else to ask it.
No, I think that's right on the head, right? And I think we've seen the 713 nights, which I think we hear of less and less now. But I think we saw those were, again, maybe just from the outside looking in, I thought those were a success.
Yeah.
Because you would go to the stadium on those nights and you see that those corners, right, that were the 713 sections, were basically the most crowded parts, or some of the most crowded parts of the stadium. I mean, there's a bunch of ideas, and I think we mentioned these over the years. College night, right, or make it easy for college students to get out there, because maybe just by association, that was one of the things about Robertson, right, that it just made it easy to for kids on campus to get there. But I mean, you have plenty of colleges around town. We've seen plenty of MLS teams have that special. I don't know if you do discounts for first responders, for teachers. I mean, I think there's plenty of ideas. But I will say, and I think we've seen, and this is why when people say, well, Ted's putting in money, okay, but I mean, is that the right choice? Or would you rather say, hey, Ted, maybe forget the seats, but make it cheaper to get in the building, right? And people will come and watch the game and support. Or if if the entrance is cheaper, or I don't know if you give away tickets, but that allows people to spend on concessions, spend on merchandise, and ultimately, which is what you want them to do, come back.
So Victor, let me ask you this one, and you are more accurate when it comes to the history as of late of the Dash and Dynamo. Has there ever been a doubleheader where the Dynamo play and the Dash play, and it doesn't matter who comes first or last, and you make it one ticket for the evening? Is it because both teams believe they can sell out and there's no need to do that? But is that not a no-brainer to just have back-to-back matches and fill up that stadium? Would that not make sense?
No, I think what I've heard is that it's tricky because it's the way you put together the NWSL and the MLS games. I think the one time they had, if I remember correctly, they had that doubleheader was maybe it was a couple of hours apart between the Dash game and the Dynamo game, but I think the ticket was the same. They've done them where you do Dynamo 2 and Dynamo back to back. It's also you're also asking people to sit in the same, or have been sitting down for 4 hours, right? I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily what they want to do. A lot of people maybe they don't cross over, or they don't care about the Dash, or the Dash don't care about the Dynamo, right? I think
I'll stop you there, Victor. So I think you're making my point. Is it because maybe we don't want to see, and look, I'm trying to be, I love the sport. I'm an advocate of the sport. If we were to have a Dynamo game starting at 6 o'clock, followed by an 8:30, 9 o'clock start for the Dash, are we saying today that it is likely that stadium wouldn't remain full?
I think because of the recent history, right? I think because, again, consistency, getting people at the stadium consistently, right? I mean, I think that they haven't harvested this market. So to just kind of pull an event like that out of the hat, I mean, it'd be great, but the expectations have to be a little lower, right? But we've seen it again around the league. I think Seattle is probably a good example of this. The Reign and the Sounders back to back. Obviously, they're further along in again, those community outreach that we talk about, being more connected and trying to bridge the two teams together. Ironic, I think, considering that these two teams, the Dash and Dynamo, are actually owned by the same by the same owner. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's just all these things can be done. They just got to put in the work behind it, and you need the manpower behind it. That's where I think the investment comes in, right? I mean, okay, so you have an office. Does that mean more people are going to be hired, or Is it just to save money on rent? Is it an investment for real estate? I mean, how does it ultimately benefit the teams on the field, right? And I think that's why I think, again, to take the words from Jaime Frias, I mean, human resources. I mean, that there's a big need for investment on that front. And I think, even when we compare, right, the communications teams from the Dynamo and the Dash, and not just communications, a lot of the employees are shared. Let's remember that. So as opposed to maybe you just observe the Texans or the Astros or the Rockets and how many people they have on staff, how many people they have just to one certain department in marketing, in communications, and in sales, right? I think all these things matter when it comes to how do we get people at that stadium? How do we fill it up? I think the market is there, but again, they need to till the soil. They haven't done that for years, and it's not just going to happen from one day to another just because, hey, we want people out now. There's a need to, again, make this work, and again, hopefully they do. We're rooting for them. There's no lack of ideas here, but there's got to be people that execute them.
Absolutely. So that's the work that the Dynamo Dash have to do to fill up their stadium. But as you can see on screen now, a stadium that was full here in the last couple of days was Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. 71,635 fans in attendance watching Atlanta, by the way, destroy Miami. But it's consistently the top market, Victor, in the MLS, meaning Atlanta, when it comes to attendance. They've been doing great. And there was a huge push in anticipation of Leo Messi coming to Atlanta. He did not. His team lost. Was that fair? Was that right? Are those even words that can be used, that Messi, didn't show up?
I think everybody's going to have a different take. Fair to who, right? I mean, was it ever advertised that Messi was going to be guaranteed to be there? I mean, I think if you just take it from that, it sucks, right? I think people in Atlanta probably knew that. It boded well because every game Messi had shown up. But also this was a conversation, right? And even though it's still kind of, they're still trying to steer away from this, the turf, right? Everybody was asking, was Messi going to play on turf, or was he going to be risked? And I know he said that he was willing to play on turf, and Tata Martino has come out and said that's not the reason. But wouldn't we think otherwise? I mean, why else would Messi not play in this game? Obviously, maybe they do have a lot of games, like Martino has said. The OpenCup Final, they're thinking about that too. Maybe I think the biggest one is Miami won the previous week, right, against Kansas City at home. That sort of kept them a little bit closer in the race than that. Maybe they said, look, maybe we don't have to play Messi this game and just kind of see where the other results fall. And it's still plenty of games ahead. And obviously with the players that they have, they know they can probably run the table. So it's not, I do think the rest was part of it. And the ultimate thing is, again, Miami doesn't know anything to Atlanta. Messi didn't have to show up. I mean, it sucks, right? But I guess, it's not like he missed out on a Miami home game.
No, you're right. But isn't the expectation now, Victor, that he's here to help his team? He's here, obviously, also to help the league, and I think that comes with the territory. It's a combination of being there and putting in those games that quote unquote make a difference in the league, in bumping up your ratings. Do you think he got pressure at this point, or was it, hey, you know what, you tell us when you feel good, you tell us when you're ready? I know there has to be a balance there, and truly his physical well-being is important, as well as his mental well-being is important. You can't ask too much of any human being, but this is part of the calculation. Maybe some fans felt defrauded and felt, you know what, I paid $300 for a $45 ticket, and he didn't show up. Was it advertised on my ticket that Messi was going to be there? Probably not. But that was the
they still got the game at home on Wednesday, right? I think they got Toronto coming up next. They got a couple games back-to-backs with Charlotte to end the season, I believe. And look, ultimately, the league wants, well, I don't want to say wants in a contrived way, but I think, for the advertising, right, and helping to lift the sport, the wish sort of has to be to have Messi lift the MLS Cup, right? If he screws it up his ACL on turf in Atlanta, that's not going to help that. Would it have been great? I think, yeah, but again, in the bigger picture, I think that they made the right choice. I mean, it sucks for Atlanta fans, but you know what? They got to see Atlanta win, which is maybe their home team. And if they were just there to see Messi, well, then maybe they should just take a trip to Miami. It's not a bad trade-off.
Well, you're right. The script right now is calling. And by the way, we're going to be talking about this in the run-up to the US OpenCup Final. The script is Messi lifting that trophy and what that means for the league, what that means for U.S. Soccer, because they're the ones behind the US Open Cup. Is that disrespecting the Dynamo? And do the Dynamo even look at it and say, you know what? We know what's expected here. Everything is headed in one direction, which is Messi winning. How do we get in the way of that? Because I'll be honest, and I'll be very cynical. Even if the Dynamo lose, the Dynamo ownership wins because the league gets a higher profile look. There'll be so many people worldwide watching the US Open Cup Final. The athlete in us says, I want to compete. I want to beat Messi. The Dynamo want that. But the attention in the league, if they have a choice, and this isn't like professional wrestling, I hope, and there's a predetermined winner. Don Garber it wants to hand that trophy to, and I don't know if Don Garber would do it actually, right? Because it's the U.S. Soccer Federation. But
not for this one, but for the MLS Cup.
Yeah, MLS Cup to Leo Messi. But you see my point, right? That's the dream script here that the league is hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, right. I mean, I think again, not in a contrived way, because I don't think they're moving in a direction to make this happen. But I think that's the poster you want, right? That's the picture you want. That's, I mean, how many times do we look back to Beckham lifting the cup, right? And some of these moments, throughout the history of the league,
right?
And so I think, yeah, I mean, there is that interest there. For Houston, I mean, what other opportunity do you want? I mean, this is the most important Open Cup Final you're gonna be in, right? The last one they played in, which they won at home, a midweek match with half a stadium in their own town. I mean, again, this is, like you said, worldwide attention now here. You got a star in Hector Herrera. I mean, you're going to get some of this too. And who knows, maybe if they go out and win it, I mean, this would be arguably the biggest win in the history of the club. If because of the international attention, we'll see.
That said, Victor, forgive me for interrupting you. Then do you throw everything, toda la carne? Do you go for it all in that U.S. Open Cup Final? Is this Ben Olsen's moment? Does he know that, you know what, I'm now in the final of U.S. Open Cup. I might make playoffs, and who knows what happens. Is this the key moment? Is this the season for Ben Olsen and Pat Onstead and the Houston Dynamo FC? Is this the opportunity for them to at least say we're present? This makes us a better club.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, if you're in this sport to win, I mean, I think you see a final in front of you, and absolutely, and more so because of the opponent. I mean, that of course plays into it. I think they have to see that as a big moment. Of what it is.
Big moment, but the biggest moment of the season. This is the season. You throw everything at it and forget whatever happens after that happens. Do you have to make that binary choice?
I would take that approach, yeah. And you're still striving for the playoffs after that. But I mean, you don't know if they're ever going to have this opportunity again. You don't know if they're going to have another final under Ben Olsen or under Hector Herrera again. this could be it. And for a lot of players and maybe him as a coach, this could elevate them to another level. Probably would, obviously will, I think, elevate them to another level. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's something that, again, the Open Cup, what it is, I mean, it's been parlayed into a big opportunity like this. Nobody knew this was going to be what was at stake in the final, but absolutely. And I think there's a certain part of it where Olsen has already sort of solidified his future here, right? Because of the results. I think even if they miss the playoffs now, we've talked about it certainly with Onstad as a GM, knowing what we know about Tetsigo as an owner, I don't think he would, be abrupt to with these results, right? And especially depending on what happens with the Open Cup. I'm not saying it's the right decision. I'm just saying that I think that's foreseeable that he would stay on anyway. So I think, yeah, with all this in mind, maybe not having a lot to lose, you go after it all. The
2023 US Open Cup Final will be played on September 27th in Miami. Well, in Fort Lauderdale officially. Yeah, that's where the Drive Pink, is it Drive Pink? Park is the home field for Messi and Inter Miami FC. What's interesting, another part of that, and we'll have a lot of coverage, Victor, we're hoping to get down there and be there for that match, is that this is not an Apple TV match, right? This is a competition run by US Soccer, so it'll be on other networks. I'm sure Miami, or rather that Apple TV probably wanted to roll that one in there. That's one probably they missed, but there is a separation, quote unquote, and we'll talk this about in a moment, between MLS and US Soccer and the rights and that separation that's come. But is that healthy now that more people will have access to this game potentially?
I think so, because nationwide it'll be on over-the-air television in Telemundo,
right,
in Spanish.
Yep.
And we know, obviously, when these things happen, there's even English speakers, right, that'll tune in Telemundo because it's already over the air. I think Paramount has the rights in English.
Yep.
So yeah, big moment for US Soccer as well. Maybe one of the things that hopefully gets put out there. Obviously, I know we've talked about state of soccer media, but just the historic nature of it, right? I mean, this will be if Messi wins that championship and what the old Lockhart Stadium used to be. So throw that in for history.
Fort Lauderdale Strikers, sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it'll be a big moment all around. And I think, again, I was just thinking about this. So we're covering a little bit more of the NFL, obviously, here on the Deportes Nation as well. And I've always kind of thought about this with the NFL. It's the reason why they're so. I think one of the keys why they're just so big is because they understand, or at least have, over-the-air television, making the game accessible for all to watch. And I think that's, where baseball and basketball with cable access, obviously we know the history of soccer on television. It's been on and off, different platforms. Now with Apple, I mean, there's debate, but, at least it's all in one place. And I think that, I think it's important that some of these key moments get to be on over the air. That's because I always think there's always new viewers in these situations. And you'll see some people that'll be fans of MLS or some of these teams for the first time watching this final.
Even if it's just a casual fan, Victor, it's important to continue growing the sport, to continue bringing more energy to it. And we're about to talk specifically about that and about U.S. Soccer. And one of the news that's coming out of U.S. Soccer, the U.S. Soccer Federation, is that the headquarters are moving to Atlanta. We were just talking about Mercedes-Benz and how that stadium and that franchise is consistently the top attendance in the MLS. What do you think of this move from Chicago to Atlanta? Why Atlanta and why now? I know there'll be a big investment, by the way, from one of the owner, the main owner, if I'm not mistaken, from Atlanta, to build a $50 million plus facility to continue growing the game, expanding it. We're going to talk about some initiatives that U.S. Soccer is also in the last couple of days announced. But let's talk about the move. Does it make sense, Victor, in your eyes? It's a federation that continues to grow. We need to be critical of it in the sense of asking questions. But what do you think about the move?
I like it. I think we see that with our national teams. We've seen that with national teams here in the U.S., right? Argentina is building a facility down in Miami. The same way that Mexico has their national team center, right, just outside of Mexico City. Again, maybe a move long overdue. I know they have a facility in Kansas City, the U.S. now, right? They obviously always do the January camps in L.A. They've had their headquarters in Chicago. But I think having it all centralized, having a national training center, I like it. I know there's people that have said maybe conflict of interest. Why is an MLS owner putting up the money? Maybe there's up debate for that. I mean, are there other owners, right, that have been wanting to put up money and were denied? I mean, or is Arthur Blank the first, right? And if that's the case, then why haven't other people stepped up, right? I mean, if it's open for all, right? But ultimately, I think it is a good move.
It's a good move, Victor, in the sense of it was necessary. That there were not enough resources. Look, one of my contentions with U.S. soccer, and I've had this for years, is who is working for U.S. soccer? Is it the youth community? It's almost like taxation. If you're registered under U.S. soccer, you're paying a tax that goes to the federation to have the right to do that. And then what do they do with that money? There's always been questions about, well, if a 10-year-old young person in Texas pays the fee to the federation, what do they get in return? A card and some insurance that may or may not cover you as a third or fourth option? That's a valid, I think, fair question. So is the federation hurting financially? Is that why they need an owner to step up? Was this the best moment for this to happen? So look, I'm happy for it. I'm happy for growth. Right. I'm happy to have a center, ideally, where the sport can continue to grow and thrive and keep up. To me, it's, well, why, as you mentioned, no one else stepped up? Financially, they couldn't have, the federation itself didn't have the funds to do this. So it's just the timing to me is interesting. I'm grateful for it because it's good for the federation. And we'll talk about, by the way, in a few minutes about the strategic vision that was also announced. But why now is my question, Victor. And I don't know if you have an answer or an insight.
I mean, again, maybe we'll find out more in time. You can start talking conflict of interest if it leads to something, right? What does this mean for maybe the upcoming World Cup? Is that going to give Arthur Blank one of the semifinals, for example, or something like that? If that was part of the deal, I mean, I think that's something that, maybe you can look at, or can you? I mean, maybe that's up to debate because again, if you do, U.S. soccer is part of this process, right? The irony I do find is in some of these quotes that we see where Arthur Blank is quoted as saying, the professional athletes need the best, right? And this is providing the best. But Mercedes-Benz, the stadium, has turf, right, for soccer and for American football. So, and I know that's, maybe tough, different conversation, but I think, it's just one of those ironies, right? There's an investment for a national U.S. soccer center, but not to make turf work here. And I think all these answers we'll find out in due time. But again, just in the overall perspective of what it does for the national teams, what we think it'll do for the national teams, right. I think it's great.
And look, the announcement of this move from Chicago to Atlanta, one of the news that U.S. Soccer made this week. Also, it was announced, and you can see it on your screen now, there's a new strategic vision for U.S. Soccer. And I always ask myself, how does the federation come up with this? And I'm going to, as you can see on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, but I want to bring it full screen. So U.S. Soccer is now talking about a couple of things. 5 pillars, strategically set pillars for U.S. Soccer. To grow the game, to create a world-class organization, to grow the soccer economy to fuel reinvestment, to develop winning teams, and to foster the best playing environments. Things, I think, Victor, that are obvious to us, that are clear to us. Right. I don't think they're reinventing the wheel. But again, why now? Is it because it was just time to reset where the federation has been going? Is this a marketing strategy, Victor, because of the World Cup coming to Mexico, United States, and Canada? And there's talk of that. I'll break some of these down because I really want to have you, if you're watching or listening to us, you're soccer fans, and I'm sure you've had some kind of relationship, I'm going to use that word, with U.S. soccer. But Victor, what are your first impressions when you hear the strategic pillars and these 5 categories?
I think it's great. I think it begs the question, what the hell were they doing before, right? I mean,
sure.
If that's, I mean, I hope it's not going to be presented, right? If it's something just innovative and it's maybe more of a clarification, I don't know. But again, this is all stuff to me, well, it sounds to me, right? This is all stuff that sounds to me should have been already the objective. Maybe it was, and they just needed to re-clarify it. But I hope it was already the objective, and I'm glad it's certainly pointed out now. And again, the biggest thing I've always said, we've seen a lot of these marketing things with clubs, with the federation, putting it to action, seeing it in action is what's going to make us believers.
Well, look, one of them is called Fostering the Best Playing Environments. And if you're watching this podcast, you can see it on your screens. And I'll try to make it bigger here because I'm blind. But I'm going to read it to you. Our coaches and referees are critical to healthy soccer environments. I agree with that 100%. It says here, we will partner with our members to address the specific barriers facing referees, including the extensive abuse and the unique barriers facing coaches, including educational access. But I like, because as a referee, as a high school referee, the abuse, and it's extensive abuse. But how does a federation, Victor, crack down on that? I go back to the Dynamo Dash and the media attention they need. Does this mean that U.S. soccer is going to spend money doing this, or they're just going to send out memos to families, memos to clubs, memos to leagues saying, hey, stop abusing the referees?
Right?
What can they do?
If they wanted to, they could hand out fines and make it I'm talking about this issue specifically, right? I mean, again, putting stuff to action. When you want to get something done, you find a way to get it done, right? If they see this as a big problem, they're the ultimate governing body. They're above MLS, they're above the U.S.
But I'm going to stop you, Victor. What has U.S. soccer done for me lately? How has U.S. soccer touched my life other than asking me to pay $150 to go watch the men's national team? What has U.S. soccer done for me at the grassroots level in my lifetime? Send me a patch that says U.S. soccer when I paid $5? Send me a card with insurance that I paid $12 for? I get what you're trying to say, I think, sir. But how can they? I don't understand how they're going to have initiatives to create playing environments when it doesn't trickle down. I don't see it trickling down. I don't see things happening. Well, I don't see them getting in front of the community. I don't.
No, I agree. I think again, some of these monies, some of this money should go back to local fields, right, all over the country. Again, how you dictate that, I mean, and that's maybe where we see, it gets politicized a little bit. But I think overall, right, putting more fields up in the community, I think that's something that helps grow. Again, beyond just the membership, right? I mean, you want it to be a sport everybody can play. Again, referee educations, like they mentioned, coaches educations. I mean, one of the big issues that has been talked about is the courses are too expensive, right? If you try to go get a license in Europe, it's not the same, and it matters more, right? It's higher value in the professional field, right? The coaching licenses.
And I'll come back to that because that's huge. But look, here's one thing I do like that they've made very clear: grow the soccer economy. To me, that means money. It means significant investment is needed at all levels of the game to accomplish our goals. Attracting ongoing investment from key supporters such as corporate and media partners, philanthropists, investors, and professional leagues will be possible if we partner with our members to increase the size of the soccer market. This is a business. And here's Victor, what throws me off again, that all of these businesses, including the MLS, including the Houston Dynamo FC, talk about moving away from pay to play and make pay to play sound like it's a bad thing. That's what this is. This is all a business. If you don't have investment from sponsors, if you don't have investment from someone, which includes participants, what do you have? You don't have anything. So I think this is an interesting way and an honest way to say, look, we have to grow our soccer economy. That means people have to spend money, whether it comes from a fee attached to a player registration, or whether it comes from a philanthropist, or whether it comes from Apple spending billions. That's part of this growth. So I'm happy they're announcing that because they're capitalists, as they should be. Spend the money, find the money.
Again, and I'm with you again. I mean, isn't this what's happening already? So what's the difference?
Sure. Maybe they're becoming more public because they need a little bit more money. It's telethon time.
Well, maybe it'll be on the New York Stock Exchange.
Maybe. So look, going back to that, and one of the pillars of this was developing winning teams, create world-class organizations. But I go back to the growth of the game is for the game to become more accessible, Victor, and that means coaches being able to pick up licenses easier. And it doesn't mean diluting the quality of education, but certainly the pricing. I think that's something we've heard from many, many people. It's an exclusive club, an A or a B licensed coach, because it used to be an easier process, Victor. But now it's intense, it's travel. It's not just the fee for the actual license. It's being able to get away from your normal life, from your job for a week or two, and spend thousands of dollars to go there and get it done. And many cannot afford that. Do you think that needs to change?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's listed on here, I mean, again, it's very general statements. I think we all sort of have solutions. If they can at least even put some of these in motion, I think, at least they're sort of following up on it. But again, I go back to it. All this stuff sounds great. Those are the kind of things I agree. I said, make the game more accessible. It does have to trickle down the community. I don't know if that's free fields. I don't know if that's more accessible leagues. Different things. But I think, again, setting it in motion is the biggest one. And again, a lot of the stuff sounds like stuff that's should have already been going on or it seems like was already going on. So we'll see.
Victor, look, I'm hopeful that these initiatives, that these strategic visions, that these changes are positive for the U.S. Soccer Federation and for U.S. soccer in general. I'm a part of the system personally, and I want the system to be successful. One of the deficiencies that I see and I've seen for years, Victor, and you and I live it. We live it in Houston, one of the most diverse cities in the country, where the population, the majority population is Latino. We have very few Latino leaders. Of U.S. soccer ever been to an inner city field in Houston?
Yeah,
and
some don't care to go to the conventions, right? And I think
in Dallas,
that's the thing.
right? Please go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, they can, for all intents and purposes, they're the governing body of soccer in the United States, U.S. soccer, but they don't own the soccer ball, right? I mean, I think again, you're going to have all these leagues regardless. You're going to have all these clubs, these teams. There's going to be coaches out there that, again, you and I know probably are more, qualified, right, because of their experience, but maybe don't have that coaching license because they haven't either pursued it or needed it, right? And again, like we talk about here locally with the Dynamo, which again, it's an extent of U.S. soccer. I think nationally, U.S. soccer has to be the thing that brings everybody together. And again, hopefully we see this start to happen. Allocating the resources in several different areas. again, if they wanted to, if they thought that, abuse against referees is a big issue, okay, then go out there and enforce it. Go out there and handle it. Go out there and whatever you got to do, right? Not just say it, right? But show it. And the same thing with empowering coaches, the same thing with empowering players.
Victor,
It can all be done if they wanted to.
look, I like your optimism, and I agree that it can be done and it should be done. And if the federation doesn't even try, then it's even worse. But Victor, being all things to all people is so difficult. We live this in Houston. We've talked about this. The Dynamo professional organization right now have moved away from the model they had before, which was an exclusive arrangement with one youth club. Now they want to work with everybody. I get the idea, but the reality of that, Victor, is so difficult because you have to have investment. And I don't only mean financially. You have to invest time. You have to invest energy. You have to get in the community and talk to people to really help them. I think it's a noble idea. I think it's fantastic to think about it. My question is, how do you implement it? To me, Victor, and I'm going to give you a bottom line, and I don't want to leave on a negative note. To me, these strategic visions announced in 2023 prior to the World Cup, and they referred to the World Cup several times in the announcement, is a marketing tool to make sure that they're ready to receive sponsorships when the World Cup rolls around. And there's nothing wrong with that, because look, I do believe that some of that money will eventually trickle down into the community. But at what cost? At what sacrifice of saying, look, we're here to help our soccer community. We're here to help U.S. soccer, when in fact we first have to help ourselves. And we first have to pay the national team. And we first have to pay our executives. Look, it's the same argument, Victor, and I'll say this, as what's happening now with unions, and how the leads of big companies like GM talk about their compensation. It's like, no, it's okay for me to make 30 to 40 to 50% over 4 years, but our workers should only be making 10 or 15%. You can't have it both ways. If it's altruistic, if it's going to give back to the community, show it. And you know what? It doesn't have to be that you give back any dollars, but build a field everywhere. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen, Victor. So this is the balance I think we have to strike. Is this just a great marketing opportunity? Is this the timing to start doing these things so that the pressure is not there later that we didn't try? I'm skeptical, but I'm also hopeful that at least something's being done, something's being tried. And I'll say one more thing, Victor, and you know this as a sports journalist. We need more transparency. Where is that money going? How is it being spent? Who is deciding where that money is going, and what priorities do they have? And look, decision makers and leaders have to make decisions. It's not always going to be the right decision for everyone, but that's why leaders are there, to make those hard choices when they have to be made. I'll take my pill now, Victor.
No, I agree with everything you said.
Really, for once? I like that, Victor. So, Victor, as we wrap up, producer tells us we're going. We've been having a good time, at least I have. Victor, what do you see in this upcoming week as we get into the almost middle, if not late, September?
Yeah, I think getting to think of it, right, with the MLS season here. Again, a few more results that'll maybe define the picture, make it a little more clear. Obviously, we get closer and closer to that US OpenCup Final. And yeah, I think the ball keeps rolling on, and we see how this all progresses. Leagues all around the world. We talked about the qualification with the Women's Gold Cup. So see what happens there.
Well, I love that we're talking more about the women's game in general, Victor, whether it's an international break, whether it's qualification or qualifying for certain competitions. That's a regular part of what we're going to be doing and doing our best to cover it. So, Victor, we got to go. Our production staff says you guys have gone way too long. So, Victor, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time, for being with me.
Yeah, likewise. Again, thank you always to people who listen. And any questions, comments, always send them our way. We're always open.
Yeah, no, and if you have any quejas, if you have any complaints, send them to Victor. Don't send
I'll
them
take
to me.
them. I'll take them.
He'll answer. On behalf of our production staff, on behalf of Victor Araiza, I'm Alex Parra. Thank you for following us. Thank you for finding us, for listening to us, for watching us. We really appreciate every time you follow us on this, what we call the Deportes Nation, for now, soccer podcast. Help us name it. That'll help us a lot as well. So on behalf of all of us, have a great day, great night, great evening, wherever you are. Until next time when we meet here on Deportes Nation.